We're just over 2 days away from the open of free agency, and no one has more eyes on them than Paul George. Remember, George can opt out of his contract and become a free agent this Sunday. So let's just take a look here at some of the other top free agents as well, because LeBron James, of course, has a player option. We kind of know now that Bronny James is in Los Angeles, which way we expect that to go. But take a look here. Harden, Klay Thompson, DeMar DeRozan, Miles Bridges, all will be unrestricted free agents. So, Bobby, we've mentioned that this really is the summer of Paul George here. But where are we in terms of his decision-making today and then the ripple effects also that it could cause?
I would say free agency is frozen right now.
Okay.
Waiting on Paul George's decision. I'm not ready to go Kawhi Leonard 2019 when we waited basically until like mid-July. But when you look at a team like Philadelphia, could potentially sign him with cap space. What happens in Philadelphia if he goes back to the Clippers?
Yep.
What happens if a team like maybe Golden State comes into play to maybe trade for him? What happens to Klay Thompson? Here's another name for you, DeMar DeRozan. Mm-hmm. If things don't work out in Chicago, DeMar DeRozan would love to be in a Los Angeles Clippers uniform.
Okay.
But he can't get there if Paul George and James Harden are still there. So as you could see, certain dominoes have to fall in place. We're going to learn a lot in the next day when Paul George will either opt in, which would mean a lot of different things, or opt out and become an unrestricted free agent.
It could affect a lot of different players as well. But, Bobby, you just mentioned a litter of teams here. So we're talking about Golden State. We're talking about the Clippers, not to mention Philadelphia. Perk, where do you want to see Paul George land here?
I think the best place for Paul George is the Golden State Warriors. I mean, just think about it, right? The most important position in the NBA is the wing position, okay? It's proven, right? We saw it with the Nuggets with Aaron Gordon. We saw it this year for us with the Celtics with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And we see the effect that OG Anunoby, when it comes down to title contenders, have on the Knicks. Think about this. When you team up with Draymond Green and Steph Curry, they're basically guaranteeing you a chance to win a championship. They done it for Kevin Durant. They done it for Harrison Barnes. They done it for Andrew Wiggins. Paul George, when he's in the right space, is one of the top two-way players in the game, especially at the wing position. Here's the thing, though. I want to see all of y'all. I think I've been on NBA Today enough to see all y'all faces. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, here's the thing. This is what I need to ask. What do Paul George want, right? Because I understand he want more years and he want the max, and I get all that. But it's something else to this. Because now that I'm thinking, and you know when I get to thinking, it's a problem. Because I might say something crazy, but it might be real. So you listen to him on his podcast, and he says, I just want to play the right way.
Yep.
Well, what does that mean? So it gets me to thinking, because we never heard Paul George complain about playing the right way until a certain individual actually got on his team in James Harden. I strongly believe that it's more to it than just the money when it comes down to Paul George making the decision whether or not he still want to play with the Los Angeles Clippers. And I also strongly believe that they need to have an honest conversation, a coming to Jesus meeting about what he wants and what do he mean about playing the right way and who do he want to play with. We know he wants to play with Kawhi Leonard. We get that. But then when you talk about James Harden and his system, the James Harden system, I think it's something there.
Okay, so Perk's got to thinking, but no one reads tea leaves better than Brian Windhorst. So, Brian, if you're looking at those comments about, I heard that too, about Paul George saying he wants to play the right way, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so Lawrence Frank, their team president, was asked that exact question yesterday after they wrapped up the draft. As you could imagine, you'd want to hear what the team said. And I'm going to be honest with you, Malika, he gave an eloquent answer, but it didn't really say anything. He kind of didn't answer that question. So I'm not sure they know what to make of it. And if they do know what to make of it, I'm sure they're not saying publicly. What I find interesting about this is the stance that the Clippers are taking here, because This is a very important player to them. They've heavily invested in him in the draft picks that they used to trade him in the last few years. But they are not acting like they are desperate to keep him. You know, we're so used to seeing these teams that are in danger of losing star free agents to pull out all the stops. And they are not offering him a max contract. They are not offering him max years. There is legitimate threats out there that could take him. It's, you know, look, the Detroit Pistons have $50-60 million in cap space. They could sign Paul George, but nobody considers Detroit a serious contender. And if it was just Detroit, I could get them taking this stance. But there's serious contenders out there, multiple teams that are ready to pay Paul George. And yet the Clippers have not, at least as far as I'm aware, right here on Friday afternoon doing this show, the Clippers have not changed their stance. So you ask yourself, why? Why are they not worried about Philadelphia coming in Sunday night and landing Paul George with a huge offer? Why are they not worried about Paul George pulling out stops to try to force his way to Golden State? Why are they not worried about the long shot possibility that even he'd look at going back to Oklahoma City? Oklahoma City's got a bunch of salary cap space. There's got to be a reason. I don't understand what it is, Malika, but that's what I'm fascinated about.
Perk mentioned Golden State, and we brought the big touchscreen to New York, right? Look at this thing. So important to look at it. Golden State with Chris Paul on their roster right now, $174 million. Golden State sent out cash yesterday and bought a pick. They cannot exceed $189 million. When you look at Paul George, who's at $49.5 million, if you slide him in, of course, that number gets to $223 million. So basically, you still have to start removing players here, right? When you look at certainly Chris Paul, maybe a player like Gary Payton, Kevon Looney. Certainly, if you're the Clippers, you're going to want one of their young players, Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody. So by moving back that deadline, which was today at 5 o'clock, to Sunday, that gives the Warriors more options in case Paul George opts in to his contract to be able to work out the trade. They've got a big $30 million trade asset right now. If they waive him, they're still over the salary cap. They can't sign Paul George outright.
Okay, so now that we've crunched the numbers on the big board, Bobby Marks, Brian Windhorst, does that do anything for you to kind of help us sort through where we could see Paul George make a decision here?
Well, there's two things about this. One, it obviously, the Warriors are showing their hand here because they're pushing back this thing with Chris Paul. They're not doing it because they're actually thinking about keeping Chris Paul and paying him $30 million. They're doing it because they're still trying to keep hope alive of this kind of big trade. The second thing is, nowhere there did Bobby say the name Klay Thompson. And how do you think Klay Thompson feels about this? They're clearly seeking to try to replace him, if not directly his position. They're seeking other big names. Meanwhile, he's just standing on the side of the court waiting to hear what his role is going to be, waiting to hear where he fits in. And that is an interesting set of circumstances right there, because even if you trade for Paul George, even if you hit that grand slam, I think you'd still like to keep Klay Thompson. So again, I'm a little bit mystified by the stance of a player that a team is heavily invested in. I don't understand the way the Clippers are necessarily handling George, and I don't understand the way the Warriors are dealing with the future Hall of Famer and Klay Thompson, acting like those guys are not priorities. So maybe it will become clearer in the next 24, 48 hours, but I'm a little bit mystified, I'm not going to lie.
Perk's just sitting back. What's this motion, Perk?
No, I'm just saying. Now we're here. I've been here since February when it came down to Klay Thompson. Hey, look, if they showing you right now, Wendy, you don't have to be confused about it. Klay Thompson is not a priority.
NBA